It looks just like we're just waiting on Jim Wagner. So everyone else is here.
Hey,
Where's Lord? There's Mayor.
yes, let's begin. I am going to, are we ready to go?
We're ready to go. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Mike. All right. I am calling the meeting to order. First, I have to ask if there's anyone here for public comment, meaning is Doug here?
Looks like he is, yes. So
How did I know that?
Prescient.
So anyone that's joined from the public for this meeting, if you'd like to make a comment, now's the time to do so. So please click on the raise hand function within Zoom, and I can ask you to unmute yourself. So our first one will be Doug Johnston.
Hi, Doug.
Good morning, everybody. You know, you all know how great I think you and the park team are. And so I'm going to be extremely brief, believe it or not. But I'm thinking even the best project like Dix Park has its own critics and people with crazy and half-baked ideas. And in the finest tradition of Dorothea Dix's own crazy idea to let the insane loose and A.J. Davis to give them a room with a view, I wanted to express my opinion that of all the things you each do and as a group make the whole greater than the sum of the parts, which is a special talent in any community. I'd like to add another duty of being your own worst critic, because there are all kinds of problems that arise that you're actually the best equipped to deal with. And I don't want to be the critic or the intolerant person. I'd rather you all do it because you can do a better job. So I know you're thinking, tell me something I don't know. And I will. If you'll give me, any of you would like to give me a call or meet me at the park, we can talk about some of the things that have been on my mind. I'll give you a quick sampler, but we don't have to talk about these things. Reckoning with doubts of Dorothea Dix's racial bona fides. The chapel mural is going to be a powerful thing to address that. Getting power lines and parking out of the way, perhaps even in plain sight. That's a teaser. You're supposed to say, what could he possibly mean? You may know that Michael Van Valkenburg has expressed a wish to design a cemetery. I have some thoughts about that. I think that might be part of making the park bigger, uncluttering the park by doing that. Putting Dix Park at everyone's doorstep. I know Mr. Goodman mentioned making the park connected with people in North Hills. And I think that's sort of what he was getting at. That park belongs near everybody, and we can do it with a cycling friend of mine, Craig Brown. He's a bass player at the symphony, is working on a park-oriented bike route or series of bike routes. All kinds of other things, doubling the park's apparent size and visual impact, just getting more bang for your buck by allowing planning and design teams more room to act. We can talk about any of those things, but mainly from a perspective of finding what things may be simmering or under the surface that you'd like to discuss with each other. Thanks, and that wasn't too lengthy, so I'm feeling I'm getting off to a good start. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Doug. And thank you for being the biggest cheerleader. Okay, anyone else here to speak? for public-
Yeah, next up would be Mr. Barry Erickson. Go ahead and unmute yourself and you can speak.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I read your January 26th, I believe, minutes, and there was some discussion of Spring Hill. And I really hope that the park takes seriously how important Spring Hill, not Centennial Campus East, which I did notice that NCSU has apparently just renamed Spring Hill Centennial Campus East. And I think that's unfortunate that it shows up on a park sign so quickly as it does in front of the Spring Hill Plantation House. But I really hope you'll reconsider Spring Hill as being a lost cause, because I don't think NCSU really needs that land. It has plenty of land and it benefits from the park as parkland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barry. Anyone else here for public comment?
Does not look like anyone else has their hand raised.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Next, I just want to welcome all of you and say thanks for being here this morning. And I'd also like to ask for approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? You can just raise your hand. So, Arj Corals had made that motion, seconded by Jim Goodman. Is there anyone against? We'll do it that way. Okay, motion passes. Next, we have the community committee report. Shauna.
Good morning.
Good
So
morning.
I'm going to read because we had a really amazing meeting last week. So I'm going to read some notes that Nick and the team helped me put together. So as I said, we met last week on the 20th. The community committee has established 3 task forces that are going to focus on 1, early park improvements, 2, park equity planning, and then 3, park partnership process. These task forces will be established for the year of 2021 with concrete goals and deliverables. So we're really excited to get some momentum going with community committee and get some activity from that group to support the work that the city and the Conservancy is already doing. What we did was broke people out into Zoom breakouts and had conversations around each of the task force topics. The task force committee's members had already met previously, so this was a way to engage everyone as part of the conversation. So just here are a few results I wanted to share. For early park improvements, phase 2 brainstorming, it was building off the success of phase 1 early park improvements, what was still missing and should be included in the next phase of projects. And some of the responses were to have areas that increase visitorship and foot traffic with diversity of activities, sports and games, on-park food options, accessible restrooms and facilities, and other supporting infrastructure, which, that's not surprising. Nothing I'm going to say is surprising. We all know we need shade, water, restrooms, and things to activate the space. There was also conversation about a multimodal trail system, public art opportunities, and then planting in areas that emphasize the park's natural spaces. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you. We're happy to send a written report to Marianne if you would like that and the board. And then 2, with the park and partnership community conceptions, it was really about a lot has changed in the past year and has been both challenging and rewarding for the Dix Park project. The community committee used this activity as a listening session to hear committee members and community on how the project is being viewed and the public, which we all know is essential for this park bond that's coming up, and what recommendations they have in response. So some of the responses were more education was needed about the partnership roles and the differences. Some communities remain unaware of the park and the relevance to their lives. It was really kind of surprising that some residents on Lake Wheeler still are unclear about what Dix Park is. So that's been hard for me to kind of process. I haven't really understood that. Tension in the community about the park as is versus what the park could be. Again, opportunity for more education and a way to engage, have that strong community engagement, which I'm excited. I don't know if Trey's on. I know he's really spearheading that. And the need for projects, what are the benefits and who will benefit? So I think the intentionality around the activation of the space is going to be critical. And I think Doug talked about that too, just around the public perception, the connectivity, and what it's going to bring for everyone. Also, the misconception that this project is competing with other projects or resources. I think that's going to be something that we'll continue to have to just thread into all of our conversations, because people are unclear about the role of the Conservancy and the fundraising power that has versus about the park budget through the city budgeting process. So I think there's just an opportunity there for us. Also, that there is a great opportunity to preserve and honor the site history and legacy. I know we've all been into the chapel. It is a very compelling space when you walk in. I was so proud to show my family when they came in from Ohio at Easter, and then to meet Christopher Holt while he was doing some of the etchings last week. And then also that the park is a safe space. So that was something that was shocking to me to hear in our conversation, that anybody would perceive Dix Park to not be a safe space to go. So that was a different angle that I had not considered. I'm there all the time, as any of you who follow me on social media know. I'm there at sunrise, I'm there at sunset, I'm there probably when I'm not supposed to be there, sorry. And Kate has dubbed me the guardian of the daffodils for next season, so that's taken care of. But and then I think finally with that is the questions around what differentiates Dix Park from other parks. So there's a lot of robust conversation, and I would be excited to have some feedback potentially about, is this very brief but thorough update helpful? Is a written report back to the Conservancy Board more helpful? We want to best use this team's time. I want to be better connected with the Conservancy Board, because I also want to be able to take information back to the community committee. So that's what I have for this morning.
Shauna, I think what would be helpful is, first off, if it was distributed in writing beforehand, so we get this before we can kind of read it over and then you walk through it with us. I also would like to have it in writing so I can share it with the rest of the council members.
Yeah.
So they hear what is happening. In the manager's report, we take what happens here and put that in the manager report for the council members. So that's a way of keeping them informed and aware of everything that we're doing here. So I think that could be helpful for them to hear what, the community is saying.
Awesome. And I'll work with Nick and Kate on that. We have very detailed minutes, so we will work on maybe slimming those down a little bit so they're not so lengthy.
That would be good. I read this something the other day. It says, how do you write so busy people will read?
Right.
And yes, so let's
make a video. It seems like.
Yeah.
And
Janet, you wanted to say something?
yeah, I just had mentioned to Shauna, I think it'd be great to your point, Mayor, if she writes a 1-page memo. That's something I could share at a Conservancy board as part of a kind of consent agenda, so that the board is very informed as to what the community committee, is advising and thinking about. That's super helpful.
Okay.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for being the guardian of the daffodils. Okay, next we have a Plaza and Play presentation.
Good
morning.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a quick introduction. I'm Grayson Mon, project manager with the Parks Department. We have been cruising along in the design process and have just gotten into design development with some really exciting advancements on the design. So with that, I will turn it over to MVVA. Hillary Archer and Matt Urbanski are with us and are going to give us a presentation. And we're going to do it a little differently today, where they're going to present chunks of the material, and then we're going to pause for conversation versus going all the way through and then trying to remember everything that was presented. So with that, thank you to MVVA for being with us this morning, and I will turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Can you hear me okay? I'm on my laptop today.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. It's really great to see you. It's been some time since we've had time together, so thank you for this. We're really excited. We have quite a bit to update you on, as Grayson just mentioned. But first, we just want to take a peek at where we are right now in the process. And as Grayson said, we are moving full speed ahead through our design development phase. We're about a month in, and we have about another month until we submit our 50% design development documents for a cost update. In July, we'll be looking forward to our third public meeting. And also we'll be meeting again with the community committee, which we look forward to. Looking at the end of the October month for our final 100% design development documents. With that, I'll hand it over to Matt for our updates.
Okay. So we have several things that we want to talk about in terms of developing the design. Design development is appropriately named. So in schematic design, you figure out what the uses are and generally where they're located, and start to think about expression and form. And then in design development, you really start to work those things out. And then as the kind of richness of the design starts to reveal itself to you, things start to develop. The one way you shouldn't think about it is the design is changing in any kind of negative way. The design is developing, I think, is the right way to think about it. And so you'll see the first one is a great example of that. So let's go to that. Hillary, next slide.
Can you see?
No, we're still on the plan.
Oh.
I don't know what happened.
Oh, I think because when I entered full screen mode.
Oh yeah, so it forgets. You have to go reshare. I've had that happen to me. Okay, yeah, actually, so go back one slide. So what I'm going to zoom in on, I just asked you to change the slide and then I asked you to change it back. That was great. We're great communicators. So what we're going to look at is this. So here's the plaza as we've been discussing, in the stair as it comes down, and the entrance in this direction. And here's the house of many porches. And just to give a quick other orientation. So here's our play area, our picnic area, the main path that kind of brings you through the whole thing, the chiller plant that's there, and the grove is over here. Just to remind everyone. So go ahead now, Hillary. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're zooming in, and one of the things that's really interesting, I think this has just been a fantastic development, is how we've been able to diversify the landscape and bring a lot of interest in here while starting to address challenges or aspects of the site that have to do with drainage, and then stormwater management, as they call it in the wonky parlance. But then how we could turn that into diversifying and making a richer landscape. And so what we've done is we've been looking at the grades, and we've been looking at the existing way the site drains and the way it will be modified with the introduction of the Plaza Play project. And what we've come up with our engineers is this idea of creating a kind of natural series of wetter landscape elements that will allow for natural drainage, allow for storage of stormwater, and really allow for a much more interesting and complex landscape in terms of planting types. So one of the slightly snarky things I've said about the park site as it exists is it's a little bit mow, blow, and go right now. It's a lot of mown grass and big trees and not a lot else in between. And the natural complexity of a real natural North Carolina site is been kind of denuded a little bit over time out of expediency. And so this is a great way of bringing some of that complexity, which has been a great, thing that's also been requested by the public back in. Go ahead, Hillary. So if you look at the site pre-development here, there are 3 ways that water flows off the site. We call them watersheds. You know, to the west, actually to the south, or the middle of our site actually flows towards the neighborhood to the south, and then also to the east, towards the creek. And what we want to do is actually redirect that flow that's going south, because it's kind of overloading the system to the south, and creating, and that will be more of a problem as the road is expanded, and to kind of redirect that towards the Rocky Branch. And so you can kind of get the diagram of what we're doing here. We've also looked at other ways of reducing runoff, and that's hard surfaces cause the rain to run off and then to load up the infrastructure. And so we're looking at soft pavement, permeable pavements in pink here. So the parking spaces in the parking lot and the picnic areas is softer, accessible, but softer permeable surfaces. And then also some what we call bioswales, is a nerdy term, but basically infiltration landscape. So we've taken this idea that was nascent here and kind of made this a much more expanded connection between the kind of the plaza itself and the larger grove landscape. Also, we've re-examined the existing trees. Obviously, we have great resources in terms of the existing trees. We can't build something new without taking some trees down, but we also don't want to take any down that we don't need to. And so we've been carefully analyzing. There's some beautiful, the ones that don't have leaves on them, probably many of you know, are pecans. They leaf out a little bit later. But there's some beautiful oaks and pecans, especially around, for instance, in this area near the house, the little house, which we call the House of Many Porches. And then the other thing is, you know, well, how could we have lawn space that's usable for many different purposes that also helps to connect to the grove lawn space, but also do this other idea of creating the kind of the ecological diversity and stormwater management landscape that we're wanting to create as well. And so these are some examples of the kind of richness of the planting that we could have there. So what we've done is we've really used a lot of these big tall trees, which actually have quite a bit of light underneath them, so they can support lawn underneath them. And you can see this kind of this kind of lawn that wraps the House of Many Porches here and connects us to the grove, which is in that direction, of course. And that would have those big trees in it, right? And then we've also we've introduced the kind of connected waterier landscape flowing through this way. And so the two things parallel each other, and they're interconnected probably with culvert-like connections or small bridges. And go ahead, Hillary. And so what that does is it really kind of allows us to make this another strong connection to the grove in that direction. So here's the before and after. Just go back again. So if you look in the key plan, you could see we're looking at the House of Many Porches here. And then as we take out the other house and open up the landscape through and retain the trees that we want to retain, the pecans, for instance, you could see there, we can create this kind of continuity and connection, but also this kind of really interesting, rich experience. It'll be fun to explore and walk around, and there'll be some crossings of it too. So it will be, you know, much more diverse landscape, much more interesting landscape. So here is looking back towards the chiller plant from the porch of the House of Many Porches. And you could see how that movement of that landscape and then the wrapping of the lawn around is really nice, because it creates this kind of realm around the house as well. And you could think of that lawn becoming a programmed space sometimes that wraps around the house. And in a way, it wouldn't interfere with the operation of the rest of the park. So, or or at the same time, it's very well integrated. So I just also to look in detail, we've been thinking about accessibility into the house as well. And then this path, for instance, so we've really thought through a lot of these paths again. So this path, for instance, is almost at the border between the lawn space and this kind of lusher wet meadows landscape that's there. So that would be a really nice path to walk along. And then there'll be a little crossing that could take you up towards the direction of the play area, kind of connecting the two.
Maybe we'll pause there before we move on for discussion.
That this
I
not
can-
only addresses
So,
our stormwater, but it
Yeah,
also provides this additional landscape.
so I can't see everybody. If you,
So,
if somebody has a question, could you just, thank you. Okay. Jim?
yeah, Matt, the chiller, do we know what buildings that is for? I mean, can we think through moving the chiller? I mean, is it a lot of buildings or one building, and how could we really be nice to move that?
Definitely agree with the last part of that.
Yeah. I don't know how many buildings are, I don't know what the load is on that chiller.
I think we have an idea, right, Hillary? No, not the load,
think-
but what it's connected to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can get the details on that, but I think it's pretty extensive campus-wide for the cool air of those buildings coming from the chiller plant.
Yeah, Jim, we're going to have to keep it for now. It's way beyond the scope to unplug those buildings from that at this point in time. You know, my kind of optimistic way of seeing it is what we have as a future additional play pod when we take it out, you know, when the state vacates and we start to rethink about the buildings having their own, you know, independent cooling systems, the ones that we do retain and all of that, then, you know, in the future, we'll have some extra space in this area. So what we've done is I think we've integrated it and shielded it in a way that I think it will work certainly well in the short term.
Okay, be nice to move it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure, Kate, I know we've talked a little bit about the building and infrastructure study that we're trying to scope and be ready to advance. I assume that would be part of the scope of that study is evaluating further what it would take to relocate that facility or to shift to some other strategy.
That's right. Both the centralized cooling and the centralized heating would be a part of that infrastructure piece because the campus, some of the buildings are on package systems and some of them, the majority of them are supported by that centralized system.
Can I just ask Tansy to just take 1 minute and just explain what the infrastructure study is going to cover? Because I think that's an important piece of information for everyone to understand.
Yeah, so I think it's probably worth actually setting aside more time, given the time and import of the MVVA study. But I think if there was an ability for a subcommittee or to dedicate some time on our next meeting, we've scoped that as included in the bond package. We've had some conceptual conversations among staff about trying to identify funding sources that would allow that to move forward more quickly than the bond timing is. But the goal there would be to get a further assessment of all the buildings, their condition, what potential purposes might be in there, what it would, some idea of rehab kind of needs for planning, getting a better understanding of the water and sewer infrastructure, these other kind of facilities that would need to be upgraded to support, the kind of the future purposes of those buildings. I think within that, as a complement, we've anticipated, I know this group has talked about trying to identify sort of the strategy and criteria for community partners. I think we see that as a complementary piece of work to that more fundamental piece. But I think that it is a really, staff's already started to do a lot of thinking about scoping. But I think that is a good place for this group to spend some time in terms of, it'll set the stage for a lot of the next planning in the park. So Kate or Stephen will correct, or Oscar will correct everything that I said that was wrong.
No, all of that was accurate, and we can add that if, Mayor, if it's okay, we can add that as an item for the next meeting's agenda.
So it's interesting that you bring this up. One of my items was going to be discussion about next time, what is our 10-year plan? How are we going to get and move the park forward? And, you know, we all know that buildings and infrastructure, when the state leaves, is going to be a huge issue. But we also know that we want to keep moving the park forward in phases. So there's going to be challenges with, you know, funding that. So I just want to have a kind of a high level discussion about what does the next 10 years look like? So this fits in really well with that. What studies are we doing? How are we going to look at this, and what's the vision, and how do we move forward? So
Okay.
that sounds like a great discussion to me.
That sounds great. And I want us to make sure we're keeping going on the presentation from MVBA, but are there other questions specific to the GSI, the kind of the stormwater design and the evolution of the plan? Hillary, maybe you can bring up the diagram again. And if not, then we'll continue with the presentation, if that sounds good to everyone.
Yep.
All right, Matt, take it away.
All right. Next development, stick with my language, is in looking at the play areas. We've talked a lot about the water play area and the slides and the towers and the overlooks and things like that. But in this area here, the kind of northeastern corner of it, we've had various ideas, and we've kind of developed something that we thought addressed a kind of missing piece in what we had so far. And this is a kind of garden-inspired idea. It's a kind of sensory maze. We're calling it a sensory maze, a sort of a discovery garden. It's a kind of unconventional exploratory play space that would have fun objects that are playful, that are about a kind of a phenomena of sound and light and things like that. But they're not kind of play equipment in the kind of doctrinaire sense. In other words, you don't climb on them, and you don't get, you don't fall off of them and things like that. So there's a lot of latitude in terms of what we can do. This is some images from a kind of similar play maze that we made in Oklahoma, where you kind of come across these wonderful objects that they're kind of like scientific, they're kind of artistic, and they're you could explore different things. Use talk tubes, for instance. There's musical instruments. There's this dish this guy is listening to, where you could listen, where sound is transmitted across the space by acoustical methods. There's kind of this wonderful turning stone. I don't know what all the individual elements will be yet, but they're in this spirit. And then we could have a space that you could set up temporary things like a piano, for instance, and have something like that happening in it as well. And so it's kind of a what we call it the discovery garden, or in this case, we're calling it a sensory maze. And it's kind of good just formally, because it's a series of garden rooms that you kind of discover one after another. You can imagine being a kid running around and having that experience. And it helps us contain views, because honestly, some of the views are great and some of the views are not great at this point in time. like Jim pointed out, the chiller plant, which is immediately to the south of this. And so we'll be able to completely contain the view towards that. And we can make this a lot about the sky, for instance. So that's another fun ancillary aspect to it.
Should we go through maybe the conversation and then we can pause for discussion?
Yeah. So we've been working with the Hobgoods on our comfort station and developing that. You know, we need to control costs. And they have a beautifully ambitious idea of this kind of wonderful folly that's embedded in the landscape. And so what we've been doing is just figuring out how that can be achieved. And this is so let's go back, Hillary, at one. So these are views where we're looking. So here's the comfort station in plan. Now let me just explain a couple of things here for a second. So this is our wall that has the waterfall on the front of it, right? And this is the hill going down here with the water play on it. So we're in a high point right here, right? And then there's a path coming in that goes up towards the play area. So this is low here. And so you'll see as you come down into the staircase or come into the fountain plaza here, you'll see little kids up here on the top looking down at you. And it's going to be really a lot of fun. But what you also would then discover is you come around this corner and you'll see, next slide, this. And so what you see here is this idea, this archway that almost will feel like some kind of ancient piece built into the landscape. You know, was that from a prior civilization? I'm not sure. It's kind of a fun narrative, that kind of folly-like idea that it comes out of a cold garden tradition. And you could go in there and then there's I can show you the plan in a second, but there's the bathrooms are the kind of cabana rooms are arranged in a circle around where this kind of open space in the middle. But you could see how we're really trying to integrate it into the landscape. There's walls shown in gray here because they're gray in our mind right now. We're developing how they're going to be made. One of the things that Hillary and I are doing right now is we're broadcasting live from Asheville because that's where we are on a rock hunt. We're on a rock hunt, right? A stone hunt right now. Kate and Grayson, I think, are going to join us tomorrow. And this is part of our design development and discovery process where, you know, we have an idea and then we figure out, you know, the local materials and what's affordable and talking to our contractors about, you know, constructability and cost and beauty and all the different things, bringing everything together. So we're starting to think about how can we achieve this kind of building that's this surprise built into the landscape here, and still afford it. And so we're working hard on that. One idea for those walls is maybe we could do something really neat with planting to kind of envelop them and create this kind of really neat kind of greenery that you kind of go through and into the space. And this is looking down from the top, this open to the sky on the top, the circular, this kind of cylinder that's been inserted into our little hill here. And then those are the doorways into the individual cabanas, which are, I think everybody knows, are laid out to work with enough room to have some kids change in there. Thank you, Hillary, for the slide, for the plan view there, which is, you know, slightly out of date, but generally, I think you get the disposition of the bathrooms. We have 10 bathrooms in there with enough room, there's even a little bench to sit on for, you know, putting your socks on and things like that. So it's, and then there's other support facilities for the park built around in the pink area around the outside. We have pump rooms for our water features. We have high tech rooms. We have support spaces.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So maybe we could pause there for a second.
Are there any questions or comments?
Can I ask where the big arch that you showed that was the entrance, can you show again on the map where you would enter that?
Yep. Right where that arrow.
Oh, I
is.
got you. Okay.
So that we try to, this is a multi-dimensional decision about where this was in the plan. It's got good access to the plaza, the picnic grove, and the water and the playground. That was sort of part of it. Also, there is 2 bathrooms in the house too, just so if you're concerned about having bought a coffee and now you have to go to the bathroom, you can go over there. You don't have to come all the way over here.
No, I just couldn't remember how it fit into the landscape. Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Any other
Matt,
questions?
I have a question just related to the water play area, whatnot. If you have kids playing in that area, getting wet and whatnot, the comfort station, is there any rooms that are large enough, say, for a mom and 3 kids to kind of change or, I'm just thinking about family usage and whatnot. How is that handled?
That's what that was on our mind as well, Mayor. So we that's why we're calling them cabanas, really. They're really little changing rooms that have a toilet and a sink in them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, Hillary, I would say there's definitely room for 3 people in there, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
So family-sized cabanas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, yeah, because we really want, the kids to get wet and have fun and then be able to change and not get all the sand in the car. So we've been thinking that through, Mayor, as you are.
Mm-hmm. Well, even with 3, for some families that would be difficult, but if you could just give that a little more thought.
Yeah, we could do that. We could even show you the scale of one of them and how it might work.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Matt, these are what you have currently in part of the area at Tulsa, right? More of the cabana style. Is
Correct.
that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So it might be, we can get some images from them as well.
Oh, good idea.
Alicia, did you have a question?
I don't have a question, more so a comment. As I've been on the committee, the design has evolved and it's beautiful. As an institutional facilities and operational person by background, though, I suspect that there are some ongoing operations. I see the vines growing through the trellis and think, oh my goodness, how are we going to make sure that, a decade from now, it's still of high quality and that things are thriving. So I just overlay that thought of sort of longevity and how we ensure that, what we put in place is great 15 years from now too. But it looks beautiful. I'm impressed with how it's evolved.
I think that your attention is on the right things, and that the setting up the proper way for things to be cared for and to evolve over time is an ongoing pursuit for the Conservancy and the city to work together on, and we definitely don't have the answers yet. We have the kind of will, I think. Right, Janet? But we don't have the answers, and every, the one thing we said, Alicia, is every park we worked on has a great partnership like this, but the nature of the partnership is always custom to the place and the partners and the time. It even evolves over time with the institution of the park. So I think that's what's going to happen as long as we all keep working on it.
Yeah, on that note, I think we should jump back into the presentation and keep our momentum going. We have really been making some great partnership development and design development. So Matt, as you've been saying, let's keep talking about the design development.
Yep. Okay, so House of Many Porches, we're looking at it in plan here. We've been fine tuning the whole landscape around it. Many of you are very aware of all of the interest in edible landscapes and landscapes that relate to a kind of a residential type landscape. This is really a lot of fun to have this kind of really probably the best preserved historic building in the entire campus be, and it certainly would be benign neglect that has preserved it, but it is sort of a wonderful little thing to have here. And so we've really thought through the accessibility, preserving all the trees around the outside, et cetera. On the inside, we've been working with Joe Opperman and his squad to look at the preservation of the building and the restoration of it and balance that with the costs, which are, it's an antique building, so none of that is free. What's nice about this, and again, it seems like just a wonderful twist of fate, is it's a very public private building. It has all of these porches on it, which is a very public expression. So that's very nice that even if you didn't go in, you could sit on the porch and kind of have this kind of surreptitious thrill of like being in an antique house in this kind of wonderful little landscape around it. We've been looking at programming here, and the back porch really is what faces towards the Plaza Play project more, and then the front porch really faces more towards the Grove, and then our drop off will be in that direction. One of the things that we've talked about since the beginning of time, it feels like, is wouldn't it be fun to have some interior programming for the public here that might have to do with changing uses. One of my personal favorites is an idea for art display, like if you had local artists have art shows in here. I think it would be fantastic just to put up paintings or whatever it would be, and have people come in and look, and it gives you another reason to go inside and all of that kind of stuff. And that's shown in the orange flexible space, which is actually 2 rooms right now, when we've asked Joe to make that into 1. And then you could imagine the hallway, the green, as being part of that exhibit. So you could have a kind of art show that went around on the walls there, for instance. And then on the dark pink on the top is the concessions. And the idea is you could approach from that direction. We have accessibility. We're looking at accessibility connections to both porches, which isn't shown on this plan, more integrated into the landscape. But you'd be able to, and then how that would work exactly, it's just kind of space planning right now. So there's no counters or anything shown in there at this point. And then we have 2 public bathrooms that are accessible off that concession space that are the gray. We have some storage closets that are in yellow. And then there is a desire for staff offices and storage here as well. So when you come in the front, there's the hallway door is aligned on the green there. You'd come in there, and then to the right would be the blue, which is designated as staff office, and then the flexible space, gallery space, so to speak, and could be for crafts for kids. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do in there. That would be to the left. Then you could go straight up and into the back porch, and then go out to the concession as well. So that's how that would work in terms of the flow of that. So what this generally does is allow for a kind of a front and a back programming of the two spaces. Should we stop there, Hillary, for a second, or? Yeah, I think so. Let's stop there for a second. Go back to the plan with the colors on it, probably.
Good idea.
So, Matt, are we going to, there going to be tables and chairs outside? Where are you going to sit now when you get your?
Yeah. I think we could have things on the porches. We could probably have some in this space. I hope we could have some in this space here as well. It might be nice to go into some air conditioning for a minute in there. And then Hillary, why don't you go to the site plan for a second? So what we've been looking at, Jim, is a nice little spot here under some of the big trees to have some tables and chairs out there in the landscape as well.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
All right. So I think, one of the kind of strategic ideas about the master plan for the park is we have 300 acres. We have lots of buildings. This is not a project where you just start making a very high-end landscape at one end and just spend money at a high rate all the way across it. It's just too big, and it's not necessary. There's a lot of really beautiful things intrinsic to the site already, and then there's other places that need quite a bit of spending, and so there's a kind of prioritizing of how the money is spent, and you don't want to kind of average it. You want to kind of like pick your priority areas and then allow other areas to be more relaxed. And that's actually a wonderful combination of experiences then. So one of the things that what you see in that bar chart is the play area is very important, and it has the most spending on it. Also, the paving, of course, is needed for the plaza and for the experience of the space, and that's the second highest number. So the purple area just shows those are the areas of higher investment, and it seems appropriate where they are. I hope you all agree. In order to kind of create that wow moment and create the attraction that we want to create here. But then to also not overdo it, well, we can't overdo it because we don't have endless money, but also we don't want to overdo it. It just seems inappropriate to the overall development of the site. So when we compare what we're doing in terms of the play area on Plaza Play, you could see our numbers down there on the bottom of the sheet, about $120 a square foot. And when we compare it, for instance, to the Sassafras playground in town, which is at 61 a square foot, Moore Square 72 a square foot, and our destination play area at Tulsa, which is sort of like kind of unprecedented and hyper deluxe by the choice of the client there, that's at 167. So I think we're sitting in a really good place here in terms of that. Not too much, not too little, just right. I hope, like Goldilocks would say. Next.
That's it.
Oh, that's it on that one. So that's just a concept that we wanted people to understand, how we have to make decisions about how to spend, and it's not about averages, basically. Is that right, Hillary? Is that the main message?
Absolutely. You nailed it. So
Something. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we have only about a minute or so left.
Oh dear.
So we should definitely talk about.
Yeah, what I'd like to suggest is that we hold the transportation conversation to the next meeting so we can do a larger potential Lake Wheeler Road update and the entry update, if that works for the group. And then we can shift to the public art discussion, because I know there's potentially some discussion and action needed from this group on that. So if y'all wanted to share the public art piece, but we'll hold the transportation piece to the next meeting, if that's okay.
Okay.
So Kate, does that mean we'll get a parking study? When you talk about transportation piece, you have somebody looking at where's everybody going to park?
MVDA has spent a good bit of time thinking about parking and the remote parking areas. And so we can include that because yes, there is a lot to be done there. I guess I was just saying there's also potential updates on Lake Wheeler Road moving forward and the entry drive discussion. So we can put all of that together for a more comprehensive update.
Jim, they're going to park downtown and take the gondola over.
Okay. And we'll
Best
go-
news I've heard all morning.
All right, I thought you might like that.
I love that. Love it.
All right. I know we're at our time, so I'm going to go quickly through this. We're extremely excited to have this opportunity to incorporate the 1% for Art Fund as part of the Plaza Play project. And given our construction budget, that comes to $340,000, which is enough that we've learned from the Public Art and Design Board to fund multiple artworks, not just one. There's also, as we're learning through the city core team, the opportunity for private donations for public art, which is extremely exciting as well. So as part of our scope for this project, we were asked to develop criteria for incorporating the public art into the project, into the landscape. So we came up with a 5-part list of criteria, which has since been incorporated into the RFQ, which is about to launch, I believe this week, for the call for artists. And so these 5 things are really important to us and are what we're going to hope the panel is looking for in the submissions that come through the RFQ. So the first is that the art is unified with the landscape, that it's really a part of the overall park experience and not a one-off or standing out like a sore thumb, but really integrated with the park. The second is that it creates a unique identity and sense of place so that maybe someone would come just to see the artwork in and of itself. It adds a unique element to the design overall that we wouldn't necessarily get through the landscape architecture. The third is that it invites a direct interaction with people's bodies, that it's touchable, and that it inspires in that way a sense of play, a sense of welcome, and also by potentially nodding to history, reflection for all ages, for all people. And then finally, we learned through the art board that it needs to be durable and permanent, not rotating or a temporary in any way. And so we worked really hard on coming up with some concepts for how the art could be expressed. And we came up with 4 main ways. One is integrating art into the grand staircase, whether that's through color or pattern, or potentially engraved text, inspirational quotes, whether it's about the role of nature in well-being or potentially the role of play in well-being. The second are artistic arbors or functional art. These could be sculptural elements in the House of Many Porches garden or in the sensory maze that Matt presented. They could be made out of any type of material, but one that we're excited about is these historic arbors in Central Park. You can see the use of wood, which is very prevalent in Dix Park site. On the bottom, one that we're particularly fond of is a family of sculptures, smaller scale, that some could be hidden in the landscape, sort of like a treasure hunt, and then some maybe not so hidden. As you can see, this one is a little figure just sitting on one of the steps. Very playful, very fun to look for, and very unique, very, I guess, iconic for Raleigh. It would be very, very specific to Plaza Play. And then shade canopies, thinking of ways to activate these functional pieces in the landscape, but making them more colorful or fun patterns. So these were all suggested as along with some other options in the RFQ for what we will be looking for artists to help bring to life. And that's that. Are there any questions about public art?
Any questions on the public art piece?
So this is Nancy, sorry. So then you're doing a RF for a call for artists. Then will the artist then be working with the design team?
That is correct.
Okay.
Very
thanks.
closely.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
does
that's
what-
great. Oh,
May-
go ahead, Grayson. Yep.
Jim?
Yeah, what role does the Park Leadership Group have to do? What's our role in the selection of artists and that sort of business?
Y'all are asking great questions that Grayson is going to follow up right now.
Okay. Kate, does that mean you're going to show my slides?
Yes.
Okay, I will start talking while that gets pulled up. So we will be going through the established process for the Percent for Public Art program. We have already started that process by meeting with the Public Art and Design Board, or PADB, several times. I presented to them a few times, as has MBVA. They have a meeting today to approve the RFQ, and they will also be approving the selection panel for the RFQ. Now, the RFQ selection panel does not have particular names on it, but it has groups of individuals. So things like a representative from the Public Art Design Board, a representative from the design team, representative from Leadership Committee, Community Committee, 2 artists or designers, 2 community members. And so I have not listed out the full list, but they will be approving that list of types of people versus the names. And so, as I mentioned, Leadership and Community Committee will be involved in that process. Now, typically the money that is allocated for this process is done once there is an established construction budget with the city. And because we do not have that yet, we are making a funding request from the Conservancy to hire artists now to be involved in the design of the Plaza Play and work with the design team so that this art is integrated into the project. Our estimated amount per artist for the contract for design is $10,000. We are looking at 2 to 4 artists that could be hired through the RFQ process. And when I say 2 to 4 artists, that artist could mean an individual artist or an artist team. If it is an artist team, that $10,000 would go to the entire team. So this funding request would be up to $40,000, depending on how many artists through the process are decided to be hired.
And so in terms of process per our funding agreement, funding requests like this come from staff to the Leadership Committee and then to the Conservancy Board for review and approval. Grayson and Janet met this morning with the Office of Raleigh Arts and kind of discussed the process and how the Leadership Committee would be involved. Janet, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to share from that discussion, but what we would basically be looking for is a endorsement of this committee that this funding request could be submitted to the Conservancy Board for review and approval.
Yeah, and I'll just appreciate that, as part of this role of the Leadership Committee, we wanted to make sure that, the Conservancy and, the broad community was involved in selecting these artists and that they had the opportunity to work with MVVA on the design upfront and early to make this as powerful as it can be. We are going to fund, some of that out of our program budget to enable that, because I don't want, a few $10,000 to inhibit what I think is a critical part of this overall design. So anyway, we are happy to be part of this.
You're well.
I have a question. So if it qualifies for $340,000 from the percent for art out of that budget, are you asking the Conservancy to basically put the money up front? So I don't understand what
Well,
if you've got $340,000.
we're kind of advancing a microloan, right? And
Okay.
can we get that reimbursed, or can we just get credit for that? So that, because right now it's coming out of our program budget. So it's, there is a cost to the Conservancy. So I had brought this up to Grayson. I haven't talked to Kate about it yet, but yes, Nancy, that's a good question.
And also the ask is for up to $40,000. The ask is not for the $340,000 that will ultimately be the percent for art project budget. So we are asking for the 20 to 40 in order to hire the artist during the design process now, so that they are working with the design team. Then once we have a construction budget allocated, we'll have that $340,000.
Grayson, Carlton, to Jim's question, I heard you run through a list of people that would be on the selection committee. I heard one from the leadership committee. Is there anybody from the Conservancy actually on that committee? I might have missed that.
The list, yes. I was kind of rattling from the top of my head and did not necessarily, or did not list the entire. There is proposed to have 2 members from the Dix Park Conservancy as part of that selection committee. But I also want to reiterate that list will be approved hopefully today by PADB at their meeting this afternoon. So that is pending approval.
And Carlton, there are some obvious candidates from the Conservancy that we have talked about.
So just to be a curmudgeon here for a minute, I don't think that this process in any way leads us to the kind of art that we want to put in the park. We're going to put $300,000 or $400,000 pieces of art in this park. We're going to have some significant works of art. Right, we're gonna have art. We're gonna have some. We don't need a great big committee to do RFQ for artists. I mean, that might work for a smaller project, but I see it. We're gonna have $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 art pieces here that are very significant to the project. This park does not lend itself to the typical city process for selecting art for projects. It just doesn't. And I don't know why the leadership committee didn't have something to do with how we're going to select the artists for the park. I mean, we can do this process and we can go through this, but it doesn't sound to me anything like the notion of we have to get really significant artists and really significant pieces and get to work on raising the money for them. And right, this is just another art committee without any really, we're not really telling them what we, the type and cost that we're willing to spend on art. And I'm sure everything the committee gets will be fine, but I'm just saying this doesn't fit to me in the what's going on. I know, one thing I liked at Brooklyn Bridge Park was that several of the parks will engage a major artist and spend, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 on it, but each one puts in 100 and it rotates. Man, I really like the whirlpool that was there at Brooklyn Bridge. But see, this doesn't sound to me like we're working on a world-class park. This sounds to me like another committee, and they'll be fine. I'm not saying it won't be, but it's not what we need. And I want the leadership committee to decide. We had to me, it's like hiring MVVA. It's the same kind of who we're going to hire to do the art. That's just a comment. I'm disappointed that you've gotten so far down the line without talking to the leadership committee.
So if I can interject, the next item on our agenda, and we're running out of time, we have 15 minutes, but the next item on the agenda is the role of the leadership committee and how we're going to move that forward. I think the item we have right now for discussion is this arts program. You've already gone down this path with the public art committee. I guess what I'm looking for is some type of consensus from the group to move forward or to kind of further discuss this. Janet?
I guess I would just say one quick response, Jim. I understand your concern, and I think one is incorporating Conservancy for that 1% budget. I think there are going to be layers of public art engagement, and you are right, there will be potentially much bigger pieces. We have met with Marjorie, and other members of the board. So I would just say, I think right now we've got a good integrated process for that small 340,000 budget working directly with MVVA. And there will be more on top. I guess I would ask the designers, to speak more to that, but I think this is just the beginning of public art at Dix.
Yeah, I would reiterate that, but I also think it's, we do have input on who is on this committee. The Public Art and Design Board is set up that when they administer the % for art, each project, forms a new committee to kind of oversee it, people that are vested in it or live there or whatever. So I think that, we have the opportunity to put these people that we know have these, great, outstanding qualities that we're looking for on the committee to help pick the art. And that may lead us to more than what Jim is expecting.
Yeah, well,
I think too,
I was going to say that one of the things too, and one of the benefits is bringing people from throughout the city, and some folks who might bring some really interesting ideas to the table. We can't be afraid to be bold. So just making sure that the folks on the committee, I think, would a good diverse group of people would be interesting. Okay, so what I'm hearing then is move forward and have this be the first step in this discussion.
I mean, I would, thank you, Mayor. I would just say that we would like to have, we helped come up with the categories of art that Hillary presented, and we would like to have a strong role in the selection and working with the artists. I also think that we all can get good artists to apply to respond to this RFP. So that's something, and we've had experience with this, so we will put all of our effort into trying to keep the quality high, and we will look for you guys to help support us in that, because everyone has different ideas of what is good, and sometimes it's not good. So
And they're done that. Mm-hmm.
we're going to have to kind of wend our way through that process, and I think you're going to need to trust us to some degree on that, just if I could be so bold as to suggest.
Okay. So do we need a vote? What are you looking for, Kate?
Yeah, it would just be a recommendation to Janet to take this to her board for discussion.
Okay, do we need a motion on that or just a recommendation?
A motion and a vote.
Okay, could I have a motion to Alicia? Do we have a second? I'll second it. Okay, all in favor? Oh, who is opposed? We'll do it that way. Anybody just speak up? Okay, that is unanimous recommendation, Janet, if you'll bring this to your committee. Thank you. Okay, 10 minutes left. Here we go.
Yeah, I want to also be mindful of the agenda. We have 2 discussions we need to share with you, and then we can move the rest to the next meeting's agenda. One is the purpose and role of the leadership committee, which might be a longer discussion, but I do want to introduce that. And second is the Pull into Bain project, which I do want to get in front of this group before it goes to Raleigh City Council for discussion. So if y'all will allow me to introduce this discussion of the role and purpose of the leadership committee, perhaps we might just need to, I think a good part of this discussion is, do we need to potentially add some in between meetings or other ways to share information to make sure this committee feels like they're getting all the information they need. But just as an overview for everyone, over the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot of discussion about the role and purpose of the leadership committee. And just as a reminder, it was established by the MOA to basically oversee and provide recommendations on the implementation of the Dix Park Master Plan. And it exists very similar to the Parks Recreation Greenway Advisory Board, in that this group ultimately makes recommendations to Raleigh City Council, who has final approval on the master plan implementation. But what does that really mean for this group? I think the public art conversation is an interesting one that we potentially can bring back around. Something very relevant is also the reviews of fees, which is another piece we need to talk about. Exactly what our conversation was this morning about hearing design from our consultant teams and providing feedback to them as designs develop. There is a proposed naming rights policy that is in the works that this committee will be involved in honorary naming of places at Dix Park, budget requests like just what happened, and ongoing initiatives. So I know I don't want to shortchange this conversation, but I think this is a really important discussion for this group to have, and something we need to discuss further. So I'm happy to, Mayor, have a couple of minutes discussion right now, but recognize we still have chapel fees and Pull into Bain to try to get through, at least at an update level.
Okay, well, one of the things I'm going to say, and I think this is important, is that this park is not your normal park. And this is a collaboration with the Conservancy. And what I'm looking for with this group is more proactive communication up front before something is decided. So for instance, I'll bring this up. I know there was an RFP issued, I believe, for design services for the creek. And there were folks on the leadership committee who didn't know anything about that. That's an example of a discussion that should have come forward to the leadership committee before the RFP was issued. Because part of what we want to do is ensure that we're providing feedback, but also we have the ability the Conservancy has the ability to work with the city on these decisions that are made. So I would say one of the top priorities is proactive communication, doing this upfront before decisions are already made. So everybody is knowledgeable and aligned. And I think if additional discussion is needed, we can put this on the next agenda again. Alicia, did you have your hand raised? Okay. Would anybody like to add anything additional right now?
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to reiterate what you're saying, and it's really important to the Conservancy that we are there at the beginning of the conversations and the issues so that we can have that input. So we are right in line with your thinking, and we want to continue to do that. And hopefully in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had some really good conversations with everyone, and we're moving in that direction. So thank you.
Okay, I know this is new and we've never done it before. So, you know, there's going to be some bumps along the way, but I really think that, you know, going forward, if we just all keep that in mind, proactive communication up front, I think that that will be key to success. So if we need to, Kate, let's put this on the next agenda. Nancy?
Months ago, we talked about having a work session with the Conservancy or the board, you know, and City Council. And I know that kind of, you know, COVID and everything else, and you were not kind enough to invite us to present at your retreat. But I think if we could think about having a work session would really be helpful, because, you know, there are so many conversations, everybody's having them in piecemeal, and we really do want to see this as a strong partnership. So maybe put that on your list, Marianne and Tansy.
Right. Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else? Okay, the next item is the chapel fees discussion, and I'm going to make this real simple. I'm going to ask that the council, that staff make a budget note on this item, so it comes back to council during our budget process, so we can have discussion. Apparently, earlier this year, fees were approved just as part of our standard procedures, but I think we all agree that Dix Park is different, and that looking at a fees and how we set fees, especially as the chapel is getting ready to open, we take a second look at this. So I'm going to bring that up at our next council meeting and ask for a budget note.
And Mayor, I'll just say I appreciated that Stephen Bentley and Oscar Carmona and Kate all spent time with me. I think we hammered out a compromise position. So really appreciated, right, having that process and taking a different look. And so I think we're in a good spot if we can just get it through whatever approvals we need from the council and, you know, and you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll just be part of the budget process. So thank you all for meeting and working on that. The next item is the pull-in. Kate, you want to take that?
Sure. And I want to introduce Aaron Brower from Raleigh Water has joined us. Thank you, Aaron, for being here. I'm going to just quickly go through an overview of what this project is and the importance of this project. And then Aaron is here to answer questions. The Pull-in-to-Bain water transmission line is a critical project identified in the 2016 water system master plan that basically provides a reinforcing main and distribution line to connect the Bain station to the pull-in station. And it is a critical redundancy in the system to key users, including hospitals and schools. So Parks and Recreation, in partnership with Raleigh Water, have been working on this for quite some time, looking at routes, meeting with multiple impacted institutions, such as the Department of Health and Human Services, and Raleigh Water, through their preliminary engineering report, identified a number of different routes and then went through an evaluation process based on stakeholder impacts, acquisition needs, roadway impacts, environmental considerations, length and cost to refine a route that basically takes a new transmission line from the E.B. Bain station off of Wilmington, through the neighborhoods, through the park to the pull-in, to the pull-in station. And the route that you see here is kind of this route that we're currently investigating. And one thing I want to share is that Raleigh Water has been great in working with parks to understand the both benefits and impacts of this proposed route through the park. And just a couple of notes there, we have compared the master plan to this route, and the vision outlined in the master plan is compatible with the route and the requirements of the area that would be impacted. And there are also a number of park benefits to this that I just want to highlight. And I think the biggest one of these is that this new transmission line, we will have the ability to create a distribution system off of it to support park development. And we're actually going to work with Raleigh Water to place some infrastructure that will support that future distribution system in this project's construction, which is really helpful. There's also a proposed reclaimed water line that will run in parallel to this that will be great for irrigation and other park uses. And that's a huge potential future cost savings for the park. The reclaimed water will be a lot less expensive for things like irrigation than the potable water would be. And also, we recognize that there will be kind of short-term impacts, but the potential for future cost savings as the park develops and this new water line comes through are pretty tremendous. We have a really serious water flow and pressure issue at the park today, and this transmission line will address those issues in the future, which is all good. The considerations, though, there will be some trees impacted. We're working with urban forestry to minimize those tree impacts. We know trees are beloved, but there will be a few trees impacted along the route. And we are going to work to coordinate construction so that our major park event and operations aren't disrupted. But there will be some impact to park visitors during construction of the line. And so I just wanted to give y'all a heads up on this because it's going to be presented to Raleigh City Council on May 4th. There will be a lot of outreach and communication with key stakeholders. Raleigh Water will go through bidding late summer, early fall, and then construction potentially in 2022. Overall, this is a great infrastructure investment for the park. It addresses a lot of our pressure and flow issues, but there will be some short-term park impacts. And we're going to work together to make sure we let the community know, clearly communicate, because I know if one tree is impacted, we're gonna get feedback, and we need to be prepared for that. So this is a first kind of heads up to this group. There is more to come, but Aaron's on the line to answer any specific questions, or I can from a partnership stakeholder perspective. But overall, this is a good thing that we're addressing this, and this will also come into play per that new infrastructure study that Tansy mentioned at the onset of the meeting.
Kate, have you talked to Dreamville about this?
Yeah, so Joey has been in talks with Dreamville about when potentially they may or may not, and we will work around that.
Okay.
Raleigh Water has been really great at recognizing that there are some significant park events, and we could work the construction schedule around that. But we also need to be, there's also going to be some time where Raleigh Water and the team just needs access to the big field. And we'll make sure park visitors know when that is and communicate that out.
Kate, could you put the map up again?
Sure. And Aaron, would you add anything?
That was pretty comprehensive from my standpoint. Thank you.
Kate, that you said a lot really fast.
I'm sorry.
You probably said what the schedule is for this, or but just in terms of thinking about, dovetailing this with the other efforts and thinking about the design and.
Yes. So Matt, we had a meeting with Raleigh Water earlier regarding how this project might help with some of with McAdams and your team with some of the water flow concerns for Plaza Play. And so the idea is that this project might be under construction in advance of Plaza Play and potentially might be a water source for the project, but McAdams is looking into that, whether or not it makes sense to pull water off of Lake Wheeler Road or pull water off this new transmission line.
Yeah, the other thing obviously is a big part of it is cutting right through the old landfill there, and
Yes.
that's and it's going on the route of what we want to have a land bridge on. So there's a kind of possibly a mutually beneficial development that could come out of that. So that I don't know, that's worth considering. How this will kind of seal the fate of different areas once it's done. So that is just an interesting thing to learn about, and I look forward to learning more about it.
Yeah, one thing that Kate didn't mention, she did mention that we are planning on starting construction in early 2022. It is probably, and like she said, we'll be working around all the event schedules and making sure there's access. It's on the park site, we're probably looking at about a year construction schedule for the duration. So towards the end of 22, first part of 23 is when this line would be live.
And I know that was a lot in a short period of time. We do have a memo that Raleigh Water and Parks has been working on, and we can provide that as follow-up for additional details, but there's a number of coordination issues that still exist, but it will serve the park of the future, which is a goal.
I had to jump off. I'm sorry, but great to see you all, and we'll catch up again soon. Thanks.
So Mayor, if there aren't any other questions specific to Pull into Bain, I'll ask that the remainder of the agenda items we can move to a future meeting agenda. And I just want to reiterate, we've heard everything folks have said about wanting more information up front, wanting more communication about things that are going on in the park, and we will work on all of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments on Pull into Bain? Okay, I'm just going to ask very quickly, does anybody, is supposed to do around the table, does anybody have an issue they would like to bring up? Okay, I don't see any hands there. I want to thank everybody
I'm
again.
slow on the draw. I did want to draw some attention. I know we'll do a longer update on Lake Wheeler Road, but I believe on the next agenda, we did share with this group that we were working internally with staff to try to reprioritize funding from the last transportation bond to advance design for Lake Wheeler Road. And the council on its next agenda is going to be asked to reprioritize some of that funding and reallocate funding to start that work earlier. So did want people to know, I know Kate suggested a more comprehensive update, but I didn't want anybody to be surprised when they saw that on a council agenda.
I think they'd be pleasantly surprised. So, Nancy, are you muted?
Back to the chapel fees. So if you make them budget note and they become part of the budget, that's July 1st. The ribbon cutting's the end of May. So what will you use for a fee schedule for the month of June? I mean, I don't think anybody's going to book a wedding in 2 weeks, but just in case.
Thanks for raising that. We'll work with you, Mayor, on the budget note, and we can try to work on some specific language in the budget note to address effective date.
Okay, it seems that Stephen, Oscar, and whatnot have all worked this out anyhow. And so, you know, I think the formal way to do it is through a budget note, but I think staff understands the intent.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we covered a lot today and some good discussion. We'll see you all at our next meeting. And I just want to thank staff for their hard work and thank everybody in the call.
Thank
All
you.
right.